Yeah, Rob's showing some great VR. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. We all set? All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Eric Grab, and I'm going to be your moderator today. And this is it. This is the last session. Thank you for coming. We do get the benefit is we do get the last word in live streaming, so this is it. All right. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to give a brief intro and some context to the session. Then going to let the panelists introduce themselves. We just have a couple slides. It's really going to be mostly talk and discussion. We do have lots of questions from that's in the panel description. We're going to attempt to answer those. We also have more. And I'm also going to make sure we can get questions from the audience. Actually, feel free anytime to chime in if you have a burning question. We'll also have, towards the end, I'll make sure each of our panelists gets to answer the question, what's coming in 5 to 10 years? Because this panel is really about the future. And we just had Rob running around with the cool VR set, right? So, I mean, we know that there's more to video than just, what we've seen in the past and today. There's a lot of great stuff coming in the future. And so that's the plan, and let's just get started. So my quick introduction is I'm with New Lion. We've done about 50,000 live events last year, streaming video, and so we're really excited about this space. And one thing about this show, which I'm very grateful for, is that we've gotten past the question, hey, is the internet important? Is the internet ready for video? It absolutely is. In fact, we've seen in all the different presentations and products that this is a maturing business. Now, it's far from being completely mainstream. It's far from being without disruption. There's still a lot of exciting things happening. And what's clear, though, is that it's not if it's going to happen. It's much more of a question of when. So I'm glad we're past that stage of asking, oh, is the internet going to be interesting for video? Of course it is. It's the future. So there's really no discussion there. So the real question is, when is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? What are the details? What's going to happen? What are the big challenges to making this live video through the internet really be something that's a great experience? How is it going to be different? How is it going to be better? Because it can't just be the same. And so as we look at the future, we know that it's not going to be simple because there's so many combinations of technology that are coming. So there's going to be some complexity, but I do think it's going to be compelling, and I think it's going to be a great experience. And video itself is going to be part of even a larger experience. So I think as we talk about this with our panelists, we'll get some ideas there. And this panel is great because these are the people that are doing it now and also defining the future. So with that, let's go ahead and have them do a quick introduction. We'll go, so I said I'm Eric, and we'll go this way and go down the panel. So I know Robert has some slides. I'll jump to that first one there.
Test. Hey, everybody. Thank you for letting me speak to you. I've been coming to this trade show for a long time. We're celebrating our 15th year in business at Streaming Media Hosting. My background is that I used to go to a place called Cal Poly Pomona, and in 1990 I graduated. We were at war with Iraq, and Bush was in office, and there were no jobs. I had 15 Xerox interviews and couldn't land a gig because they said I wasn't copy or material. And the only job that I could find in this book I had bought and called The Best Companies to Work For was AT&T. And so I didn't know that they were branding me with the Death Star. But before I left, I spent the next 5 years being branded and taught service, speed, reliability, and wide area networks. And there were two things I cared nothing about. But the internet exploded in 1995, Netscape had come out, and I was off and running. So I decided to start my own hosting business. I called it Microscape, because every CEO would take my phone call because it was that micro something or that scape thing, right? And then I thought, okay, I better change this to dedicated hosting services because that sounds better. And then in 2000, web hosting became like the $2 chuck of wine. $20 and you had to give everybody everything from email to e-commerce to DNS to security, and it was like time to get out. VitalStream was ahead of everybody back then, and I quickly followed the back of the elephant and was one of their first clients, and then eventually became my own CDN and my own co-location facility, and now I stand in front of you speaking on this panel, and thank all of you for letting me speak to you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Mike Rotman. I have a company called Streaming Garage. My background was TV comedy. I used to write for all different comedy shows, Politically Incorrect and South Park and all sorts of stuff. Got kind of tired of that once reality came in. About 6-7 years ago, decided to build my own live studio in my garage, 5-camera, multi-camera, switching with a TriCaster. And then we just started doing shows on the internet. So I'm all about content. So we did a movie review show. We did a music show with Kurt Smith for Tears for Fears, where we broke a lot of bands, including Fits and the Tantrums. Sort of about a month later, started hitting big after they did our garage. So yeah, that was, I got into live because I wanted to sort of get out of the TV mold and just be creative myself. And we also live stream a lot of different events as well, small panels. We do stuff for Screen Actors Guild. We do a lot of stuff for YouTubers as well, big influencers like Michelle Phan. We live stream some stuff for her. So that's sort of, that's pretty much sums up my background and what Streaming Garage is. We're a content company where we sell shows. We do live streaming events as well. And a lot of people have learned through our company on the TriCaster now working for big companies like the NFL Network.
Great, thanks, Mike. All right, Chris.
Thanks. My name is Chris Knowlton. I work with Wowza Media Systems. I'm VP and Streaming Industry Evangelist. I started in streaming in about 1999 working for a company called NetApp, working on their Netcache appliances and working with Microsoft in the relationship. Went to Microsoft, ended up running program management for their Windows Media Services and IS Media Services teams, and starting what is now the Windows Azure Media Services teams. And then 4 years ago went to Wowza. Wowza Media Systems, if you're not familiar with it, creates software that allows you to stream in multiple formats, both traditional and adaptive bitrate formats from a single piece of software that you can subscribe to or purchase. We also have a recent release called Wowza Streaming Cloud that allows you to do all of your streaming and transcoding and delivery from single cloud using a very simple interface.
Great, thanks, Chris. Rich.
My name's Rich Robinson. I run digital at the World Surf League. We're the NFL of surfing. We produce top-tier surf competitions around the world and package a broadcast from different remote beaches that we wind up broadcasting to a global audience using Newline as our player platform.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right.
And my name is Jeff Varnell. I'm with Livestream. I've been there for 5 years. We are a live video platform, if you haven't heard of us, and we also develop and manufacture hardware and software for the producer market. Last year we did about 4 million events on the platform that came from about 300,000 different producers. So as you can tell, we have a lot of people using the platform. Some of those customers that are using us, the kind of high profile ones, New York Times is on the platform, the TED organization, Tesla does their company announcements on the platform, so that kind of content. We have things like music concerts and educational events. A lot of House of Worship use our platform, so we have a kind of a wide variety of events on the platform. And really what we're trying to do is just enable people to put every event live on the internet. That's our goal.
All right, great, thanks. So now one of the first things when we started talking about, what are some of the issues with live streaming and what's the future, we got into this question of awareness. How do people find out there's live events? It used to be, there was only a few people doing live events. It was, like a thing. But now there's you hear just all those, hundreds of thousands of different live events going on. So my question to the panel, and feel free, whoever wants to jump in first, and what role does social media play inside of live streaming?
Well, we relied on that when we first started off. We were on Ustream, we were also on Livestream, and we were sort of front page, so that was nice. That's how we got our attention at first. And then as more and more people started live streaming and actually producing content instead of just a webcam, it became harder, like you said, harder to be seen. And social media helped, but not a great deal as much as you expected to. We had some bands that had 1 million followers on Twitter, but still our numbers didn't jump that much, because how engaged are they? I think now with Periscope and Meerkat, now that it immediately can tell your phone through your Twitter or whatever, that definitely has helped. That, to me, I see was the big problem with live that we always, for 6-7 years, just couldn't get a grasp on. And when we would talk to people like Ustream or Livestream, they had a calendar and a way to do it, but there was no immediate pop-up, immediately we're live now. So we used social media back then of we're going live in an hour, we're going live in 30 minutes. We'd post it everywhere, and people got sick of it. People didn't pay attention. People don't check their Twitter feed or check their Facebook feed later. So I think the big thing is now that you're getting something on your phone almost like a text where it immediately pops up. I think that's helping greatly.
Yeah, I'll jump in there too. So the challenge of getting people to tune into our live events is kind of core to the nature of our sport. Every day we wake up and we compare the forecast with the conditions on the beach and decide whether we're going to run. Once we do run, we're running for about 8 hours of the day. That's a live broadcast, doesn't stop, no interruptions. What that means for us with our fans is, and I'm sorry, I just got a little cold, of course, right before I had to sit up here, but what that means for our fans is, it's important for us to set a certain expectation of cadence on when to check back in. But once we've made that call to run, it's pulling all of the levers, whether it's across social, through our native apps, we have push notifications. We try to obviously add a bit of added value to that. So, you may not know when a particular surfer that's your favorite might be in the water. We try to let you know based on the scoring system when that guy is literally paddling out. So we see a lot of spikes around individual heats going in and out of the water. You'll see people jump on as a particularly popular surfer will come on board. But tune in is a key challenge for us and one that we're kind of keenly focused on.
Yeah, so how are people handling notifications, right? So notifications tied to events, like, not just saying, hey, this is happening, but hey, the guy I want is out there, and because of his point totals, this could be the big run, right? So how do we technically get those events notifications out to people?
So the baseline ones are, push, email, the standard ones. Things we're starting to explore are, Facebook's coming out with some tools through mentions where you're able to kind of create a more one-to-one connection with individual people. And plug in APIs to start communicating with people on a chat profile. WhatsApp as well, trying to find, and WeChat, I think is the other one. Finding other ways to kind of establish a one-to-one connection with people on chat platforms where we can.
We did a broadcast recently where, and it's amazing because the agents for artists have found this pot of gold, and it's called their Twitter account, right? So we did a broadcast for iHeartMedia, and we did it called Wango Tango. And part of the contract with Kanye West, Nick Jonas, and Justin Bieber has 20 million followers, right? So to extension of what Mike said, when you have 1 million followers, you may not get the results you want. But with 20 million followers throughout the day, we ended up with 500,000 followers watching the video, because part of Justin's contract is that he has to tweet. And this is kind of what Mike mentioned, is that now there's technology where you can get instant gratification notification and click a button, and his tweet message is, I'm coming on stage. Now, personally, it cost me a lot of money because I was the host, and the bandwidth bill would have been double had Justin put the link in on where to watch him instead of just go find me on live, right? So I look at what social was and what it could have been, and it had a humongous effect on the success of the event. And if he had tweeted the URL of where to find it, I believe the numbers would have even climbed higher. And there's a direct correlation between Nick Jonas at 7 million, Kanye West at 10 million, and Justin Bieber at 20 million. So the extremes, we find them to be very valuable.
And that's a good lesson. If you're doing a big push for something, have their contract state exactly what they have to tweet. I also ran production for Big Frame, which is a multi-channel network, and we had a lot of YouTubers, and they didn't want to do stuff sometimes. It's in their contract, you have to do social media, but unless it's specific, they'll do whatever they want. So if you specifically said you got to do a link or there's a penalty, that's pretty important to know moving, to when you're doing contracts and things like that with influencers, as they like to call them.
Yeah. So what are people going to expect when they get notified of this? What kinds of, and we talked about this before, we showed the VR around. I mean, what about VR, 4K, HDR? Are people going to demand these kinds of things in the future? Is this going to be possible on the platforms we have today? What are people looking for?
Well, I mean, I think that we're already seeing a lot of preliminary demand, and I think you're going to see a lot more. They had 154 people tune in from around the world to watch the Democratic debates in virtual reality that was broadcasted live over the Samsung network. Now, Samsung has worked with a company called NextVR. They've taken a technology that's now embedded on the chipset to take advantage of HEVC because it's a Qualcomm chip and Qualcomm's on board, right? So now you've got H.265 in the left and right eye. Now you've got it to where it's coming over on your phone like you saw today, but it's live and it's happening today. As a matter of fact, Peter Gruber, an investor who was also the owner of the Golden State Warriors, said, get out here and broadcast opening night in VR, which they did. So the theme of bringing the NFL or the NBA or the MLB to China without bringing the teams to China, because how else do you get a bunch of people to experience it this way, is all happening right now live. And that's where I was showing you guys not so much the future of live streaming, but where it's at today. And the Gear VR is going to come out for $100 that any Samsung phone will plug into, and there's a wide library already of growing content. And leaders like Jaunt, that took a $75 million round from ABC, is in Syria right now trying to capture as much information as they can. You have Next VR that just did a $30 million round. I think Comcast completed it. So these guys are racing ahead to bring you live video content immediately. And then in the other room, we have guys like Video Stitch that have already been out there ahead of some of the other companies, just not as high profile. So there'll be winners and losers, but it's coming like a freight train, and I think the expectation is amazing. I was talking to Rich about the new video they released that was unbelievable, where you could be in a wave and be circling and be behind them and be able to watch it, and now it's taken that level of interaction between me and video to the next level. So now my expectation is, where is your awesome stuff? I mean, I think that's kind of what you guys are doing. You're really raising the bar.
Yeah, I mean, and we're experimenting in that space, and we've seen a lot of great. We can obviously deliver experiences that you can't get otherwise. You wouldn't know what it was like to be barreled in Tahiti without one of our surfers taking that camera in with them. I will say though, that one, that's a VOD component. When we start talking about live streaming, I am hesitant to say that we know exactly what how the story winds up being told in VR in a live context. I think it can be a great opportunity to provide that access to the beach that otherwise people couldn't get, but we do still see there being an importance on the broadcast itself and on kind of the way in which the broadcast team tells that story and tells you where you should be looking. Whereas that VR component in a live context, I think, is a really great kind of adjacent experience that we can provide as a value add to the story. But we'd expect, you'd always want the broadcast maybe in your ear, so you heard the commentary, you understood the color of what was going on at the time, and kind of, piece it together.
Yeah. So I guess one of the questions then is the infrastructure ready for this? I mean, Chris, can Wowza do 4K yet? Or, can we do higher resolution?
That's a softball question.
I know, yeah, but I mean, is it ready?
Yeah, Wowza can do 4K, but all the pieces aren't necessarily there to do everything that you want to do. It's really difficult to piece everything together. So we do have customers that are using 4K and have tried it for live events. But the challenge is getting all the pieces that you need, especially if you need other things like captioning and you want to hit all devices, and do I have the right codecs on the devices if I want to use HEVC, H.265 or VP9. So all the pieces are there separately. They don't necessarily fit together seamlessly all the time. It's much easier today to go with a 1080p and then look at some of the technologies that are coming around, HDR, wider color gamut, more bit depth, that will provide a much better experience, arguably, than the 4K stuff will. But 4K is definitely there. It's on the cusp. And as more and more TVs and other devices have support for it, I think the demand will continue to go up for content to actually be available on those devices.
So that brings up the question, actually you made that point, what does make it better that it's on live streaming over the internet with all these technology? I mean, can you guys talk about why is it better?
Well, we're talking about 4K and VR, and I find that, we were very heavy production. We had 5 cameras while people were still doing their webcams. And I still find today that people doing their webcams still get more views. People want to just interact. And it's online. It's creeping up, but it's still a very young age, especially like with YouTubers. It's 10 to 12-year-olds, 10 to 15-year-old kids watching. They don't seem to care about the professional quality. And whenever I ask about it, they're like, it's not TV. I don't like TV. Why would I want to watch something that looks like TV? So my question for that is, we're all kind of in this space and we're all kind of nerdy and we're experts about it, but I don't know if that's what the consumer wants right now. I certainly would love to have the consumer kind of ramp up in age a little bit to go for, I always try to do smarter content, so I left TV. But, and then I left. I left heading up a YouTube company production because it was the same. It was even lower than reality TV sometimes. But to get back to your question, to kind of combine the two is, what people enjoy about live is the interaction. Take away sports, 'cause I think sports will always be great live, whether you call it on the internet or wherever the content device is at this point. But if you're talking a show, whether it's a talk show or a music show, people want to interact with almost one single person. They like that there's the influencer, the star. They want to know more about their life and see kind of what the life is around them. And I still think we haven't cracked that nut past that yet. We're still that gets you views. That's where the brands are still going to. How do we get it past that into a TV sort of live feel, into the next step? And I'm not sure if that matters that it's VR or 4K. I think there's a content problem still.
And we might never go there. I mean, that was kind of one of the things that drew me into live on the internet when I first got into this business, is that the interactive piece to it had never really taken place on television. It's the first time that these people watching the content can ever ask questions with these celebrities or whoever's on the camera. And so there's something kind of magical about that. Yes, it's low quality, but it's absolutely something that people enjoy to experience. I think the quality of it can get better, for sure. But I think that is what makes live online a lot more interesting than live on television, is that interactivity piece. It fits well with computers, it fits well with mobile. So
you can see that with NBC, with that crazy game show thing they were doing. They were trying to do these weird interactions through Skype, and it just doesn't work. It's not the same thing because you're sitting passively, you're sitting back in your couch as opposed to on the computer and actually talking to somebody. The overproduced, really fun stuff does not appeal to anybody under 30. They just don't care. And
this isn't a very important topic, right? So it's the professional high value production or high cost production versus, I got my little phone and my webcam and Periscope. How do you compete? Or what is the dynamics of making it work where there can be people doing their own little thing but big things, and how do you make that stuff work?
Well, I mean, it's measured by CPM, cost per thousand, and if you're doing user-generated content, that's anything that's not considered premium content, you're going to get $3 per 1,000 people. And if it's on mobile, you might get $10 because they're hoping they buy Candy Crushers, right? As long as you get mobile views. Premium content, right, demands a higher value. And just kind of take a step back too, I also would love to find out if we could ever know. So we have DirecTV, and anytime they say you want to watch on demand, I always clip SD. Not HD, because I don't want to wait for it to download.
Yeah.
And I would be curious to know what that number looks like across the board, of how many people cared that they could watch their program instantly in SD and be just fine, versus waiting for the download to watch it in HD.
Well, sure, and I think maybe one point in this is that quality doesn't necessarily mean a sell. I think it's a value of accessibility on how they can get it, how quickly they can get it, and how interactive it's going to be to get them engaged, right? And can they actually ask questions to people on the fly? Those things matter.
I wonder how much this ties in then with second screen. Like 2 years ago, second screen was all the buzz. I could pick up my iPad, I can interact with what's going on, or other viewers who are watching a particular program. And where I thought it was going to go, and I haven't seen as much growth recently, but I still think there's a lot of room for it, is there were some apps and some companies that were specifically doing things like where they would have the premiere of some, the season premiere would be on, and they would have the whole cast watching on the second screen, and you could interact with the whole cast in real time as they were watching that final edited episode. And that was very compelling. I think for some people the challenge was having two devices and streaming to both, and I suspect that as we go towards 4K and we have more real estate, you can actually do things where you'll have sort of the two pictures on the same screen, and you'll get a keyboard with your television. You'll be able to interact directly with them that way, and maybe also work in the back channel so you actually have video going back to them and they can actually talk to you directly.
Yeah, I produced something called the X Factor pre-show. So it was X Factor a few years ago. They did this pre-show sponsored by Pepsi, and they had a second screen through Verizon. And all it was so much content, because I was helping produce that, and it was just like bios about the people who appear on, little notes, little games to play, just anything they could throw in there. It was almost pop-up video. And I don't know, it started to become to me of like, how much does this really relate and who cares? Are we just throwing a lot of content out there? And then the question I always had is, well, why can't on the screen we actually have it playing as well as, so it's one thing with with a couple of different screens, but they couldn't because Fox wouldn't license that, and Verizon couldn't get the license, and Pepsi. So no, sorry, the show lives on the network, and the second screen lives on the device, and they couldn't combine the two, and that just felt silly to me for exactly what you said. I don't think it ever worked correctly.
Yeah.
I mean, it was definitely cool to try it, and this was like 3-4 years ago. But you're right, nothing ever became of it.
Right. I wonder if it'll get there as we get the bigger screens, the more real estate, and
Yeah, sure.
it's sort of like 4K was. I think 4K has more value than 3D televisions and all did in the time. Even whether you're hooking up a set-top box or getting a direct feed. But I wonder if this will be one of the ways that we look at selling televisions in the future and set-top boxes and devices. Is what additional functionality or value can I add, including getting into the production of those additional assets that really make it a much more in-depth experience for the viewer.
I think, speaking of today, I think we were talking about it earlier, and I think one of the best examples out there is something that Rich can maybe expand more on, that the World Surfing League does. And I'll let him expand more on this, but it's because it was made from the internet. It wasn't made from TV. So when you look at production on the internet that came from television, it's significantly different than production that grew up on the Wild West of the internet. Their example to me is pretty amazing. I mean, there's a live event going on, and I have a smart TV, and I put it on, and I'm watching this contest. There is all of this great information about what color jersey represents what, and what the score is, and what's going on, and how the heck this stuff's being measured, and what's happening. I put on TV, and my DVR records it whenever, and I got a 30-minute contest of the guys division, and it's just like the translation's horrible. I sit there, I TiVo, I get to the end, I'm clueless.
So you're saying just be clear, you're saying it's better on the internet than it is on TV?
Yes, and it was because it was born on the internet. It wasn't born on TV.
It's true. I mean, we didn't have the luxury of that linear broadcast to get the thing started. It was always fans having to find, and it was even more challenging in the past where different brands ran each individual event. Oftentimes they were competitive, so they didn't speak about the other events. So you would go to vanstriplecrownofsurfing.com. That was seriously the URL. And for a global audience, for the fans who don't speak English natively, they would have to somehow hunt and peck and find that URL, and they would, and they were diehards to find that stuff. So now that we've centralized it all, we've taken that off the table, and now we can kind of repeat message a single home for the sport. But I mean, as much as I am excited about what we bring on top of the broadcast, I know we can do so much more. We're trying to expand into what additional data can we start collecting on the beach that tells a better story. Bottom line, always coming back to what's the better narrative. Not just stats for stats' sake. MLB does a fantastic job of showing every single stat you could ever know about every single thing. I'd challenge some of them on how you draw it back to whether it has impact on future outcomes. But it's all fun fodder for the conversation. I think we can just keep pushing that and keep demonstrating ways in which just that passive viewing experience is bested by what you can do on the internet.
All right. So before I get into them giving their predictions for the next 5 to 10 years, do we have any questions from the audience people want to ask? Quiet. All right. Well, let's go down and give some predictions about what's coming in that 5 to 10 year window. What's going to be different about live streaming than it is today, and what are actually, and even a time, what are some of the big challenges we have to overcome to make this work, right? It's like I said, we're not quite mainstream yet, but boy, it's coming fast, and a lot of energy is being applied to live streaming over the internet. So what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years? Actually, let's see. We'll go in the end. Go ahead. We'll have Jeff go.
Okay, so I think our focus is really, our customer's really the producer of the content. And so that's where our focus is now and moving forward. And what we see in the future is, wireless is getting better, connectivity is getting better. You used to have to produce content from a satellite truck. That's now been reduced to the back of a room. And we see that getting scaled down even further. So if you can just in your mind think about wireless cameras all over the room, pulling HD back into one, little device, and you're basically producing a high quality live show from that little device. That's where we see things going. It's going to enable a lot of people to become much more professional producers of content. It's going to allow that kind of user-generated content to go up a level, and it's just going to allow that many more people to put their events online.
All right, Rich.
I mean, rather than telling you where I think it's going, I'll just tell you what I want. I'd love to see the ad space start to get cleaned up. I've sat in a handful of sessions where it seems like we're making good progress, but that is still a sticking point. Whether you're talking about ad blocking or programmatic ad buying, ways that content publishers can get plugged into networks to kind of find the value where it is, because I think there was probably a lot of really great content out there that just hasn't found a home or found legs because it couldn't find financing, and that's unfortunate. I think if we get to a point where those networks can be spun up more easily and plugged into that content, you can find.
Well, so is that problem less an advertising problem and more back to that awareness and getting support?
I think it's the ecosystem. I think it's the whole. I think it's the ways in which advertisers are demanding particular units. It's the way that end users are tuning out because they don't agree with what the advertisers think they want to buy, or it's the content producers stuck in the middle saying that we want to produce the best thing that we can, and we're trapped in between these two people, these two parties.
It is certainly getting easier and easier to filter advertising, both from a technical standpoint and people's even psychological filtering of, oh, there's an ad, let me turn the volume down or turn away from the screen, because they can actually do that, and it's less integrated perhaps into the things. And so, yeah, it's difficult to figure out how advertising is going to it needs to transform, I believe.
And in ours, we talk a lot about integrated branding, integrated content, where we're trying to bring the sponsor into the production of the event and trying to make it as seamless as possible. It's not the Coca-Cola thing. We try to find logical ways in which they can be incorporated into the structure of the event. But continuing to kind of move in that space. All
right. Chris, the big predictions.
Don't know how big they are. We'll see. I think there'll be more live content. It feels like we've been moving sort of towards the VOD model more and more increasingly. But I think as the bar comes down for creating high quality content, live content, we'll have more people who are out there trying to create it, generate that buzz, that interest, and get engaged with people, because we sort of lose that engagement the more you go to the time shifted content. You really lose that. It's all the sort of remote experience. Secondly, I think it's going to be more interactive along the same lines of 4K and sort of having the second screen experience back on the first screen and being able to do some things there. And I think we'll probably see that, interestingly, probably coming through things like game consoles and other and set-top boxes that just have a lot more oomph to them, so you can really do some very interesting interactive experiences with 4K on a big screen. And I think last thing, the problem that you've already highlighted about discoverability, I suspect some people are going to get really smart about content aggregation by interest. There'll be some way to say, I'm interested in surfing. There'll be one destination you go to, or maybe there's one site that just sort of rolls up all the live streams happening around the world, or a whole bunch of them. And then you can filter by interest, and then you get the top 10 recommended ones. You actually go find that content. So I suspect it'll be that tying in with social media will provide a way of discovering the content based on what your interest is and what you want to watch right now.
Okay, interesting. Okay, Mike.
We'll go from present to future, or
Right.
past to present to future. So we were one of the first companies that started this whole multi-camera crazy, and we had a lot of companies follow what we were trying to do. Mahalo, The Room Live, a lot of startups. Everyone pretty much failed because there wasn't money in this live thing, this live multi-camera. And now, as live gets bigger, I'm still not quite seeing that people want the content so much. In terms of like a show, like I was saying earlier, they definitely like interacting. They like watching sports, and I think that still is what we're looking at. Because now with Periscope, a girl who's sitting there as an artist in LA has made more than any of us have in the live streaming in the last 5 years, any of our professional companies have, in terms of content companies, which most, again, are gone at this point. But now we're starting a phase 2 of that, and I see a lot of these companies doing the same thing we were doing 6 years ago, trying to do these shows and with influencers or whatever, and I still don't see the big numbers unless you're talking about a big concert with a Justin Bieber or somebody like that. But the typical, we're going to put on a great show still doesn't seem to resonate. What I do see working, like I said, is something like a Periscope, and I really feel like that could be the next phase of take that. There's so much stuff going on Periscope, and honestly, 99% of it is people just talking to the camera, just like it was for vlogs, that I think anybody over 30 doesn't quite still understand. But I think there's something in it that around the world, those people can sort of become the newsmakers, like, or you know, sort of the documentarians of actual news that's going on. So now there isn't necessarily a network news filter. And I see that as a possibility of how live can really hook and do something new and get away from we're going to create a show and make it like TV and hopefully people will like it, as opposed to there's somebody in Syria, there's somebody in Egypt, there's somebody, you know, wherever, doing their own news take and just kind of broadcasting live even without their take on it, just the camera. And we did we did a show called Take My Bitcoins. We gave away like $40,000 worth of Bitcoins in a worldwide game show for 22 episodes live on the internet. We thought it'd be great. We did a 1970s style game show. And most of the people who were participating were not in America. I mean, we had 200 or something countries, or 20 countries, 208 winners. And it was Egypt at like 6 a.m, and Israel. And so they're much more into the technology than people here, and they just didn't think that was a big deal that we were doing a live show and giving them money. They just thought that was evolution. So I see them as possible newscasters once you start getting to more Periscope live things like that.
So is it a rebirth in journalism in a way?
I feel like it could be. You know, I feel like people are tired of the cable network news. Nobody watches. You know, well, people still do watch the network news, but not really. The cable news, it's so pointed. Whether it's no matter who you like, whether it's Fox or MSNBC, there's still a crazy point of view on all of them. So yeah, I think you get back into the journalism of the Murrows and of the Cronkites of they're just telling a story of what really is going on.
Citizen
Journalism.
Yeah. Yep.
Very interesting. All right, Rob.
Okay, well, I mean, to take a quick step back, there was a time, if you guys can believe this, when I used to sell a T1 to somebody for $75,000 a month. And it was $1,500K, and it took 6 months, and I had to justify to the Federal Trade Commission that most of your traffic was interstate, not interlata, to be competing with the Baby Bells, who are no longer part of AT&T. One magic day, Frame Relay is invented, and that cost goes to $1,500 to $500, and San Diego becomes the first county in America to have more broadband than dial-up users. I think one of our next big jumps is going to be the unhandcuffing of networks, the bottleneck being broken for both up and down. I think Google Fiber is doing a great job of leading the charge where people are seeing speeds of a gig. When that bottleneck's freed, monstrous amounts of content will be flowing to your devices, and they'll be capable of taking 4K or 8K. You know, these guys have already built the devices that are already, what we see, what we get is already obsolete when we get it in our hands. So I think in the future we'll see more of that. I definitely feel like we're going to see more specialized sites that was mentioned by Chris. We're actually trying to establish one for alternative media because guys are getting shut down from YouTube who say the wrong things against the government, who want a freedom of speech site. They're going to sell membership sites because people don't want to sit through ads. So the ads have a great effect on selling personal membership sites, right? For people who want ad-free. YouTube's got a new ad-free site that's $10 a month. Twitch is going after YouTube customers by giving them a better cut for 60-30 or 70-30 versus 60-40 for splits. The Periscope phenomena to me is amazing. There was a time when what I did was like being on Abbott and Costello. And people would say, what do you do? I do streaming media hosting. What does that mean? I host streaming media. What do you do? What's your company called? Streaming media hosting. Okay, I get that, but what is it you do? Okay, we host streaming media. Okay, let me see if I get this correct. You are a company that hosts streaming media, yes, and you're called Streaming Media Hosting, yes. What is it you do? YouTube gets bought and MySpace gets bought, right? Billions of dollars, and everybody goes and plays with it for free at what we'll call a consumer level. Periscope is doing the same thing with live because everybody played with it for free at a consumer level and then wanted it customized for an enterprise level, enabling folks like me, Streaming Media Hosting, to make money selling you a service that could be private labeled and could be whatever you wanted it to be outside the box of the free service, right? Periscope is doing the same exact thing, and it's evangelizing live, where many people who are beginning to use it now at a consumer level are no longer fearful of calling a company like mine and saying, I want to do a live broadcast. Heck, if I could do it with this, it'll spill over. And it's such a humongous ratio of VOD versus live. For us, it's 90-10. It can only go up. I think the multi-screen point that was made is going to be Iron Man in your face via virtual reality, with Facebook leading the charge with the Oculus Rift. Within 2 years, you'll see multi-screen in your face, and it will be like Iron Man, and your friend pops up. They've already got the technology where you and I could be at the 10-yard line of the football game. We click a button with our little controller. Now you and I move to the 50-yard line, and we're moving virtually at the stadium with different locations we can move to. I think one of the things we're going to see a lot more of is live linear, right? 24/7 linear programming that comes over live is like everybody thinks it's going to be in the future all about, I'm going to push the button for what I want. I think you're going to see a lot more channels being presented to you where content is either live or live linear, just like you see in TV today. Live VR will be sports and concerts and more experiences, more interactivity, and more specialized sites to suit needs. So those are my predictions for the future.
All right, excellent, thank you. So we have the people who are, like I said, defining the future, who are thinking about it. So you have oracles in front of you here to ask questions. So you have a few minutes to ask about the future. So any questions from the audience? Any burning questions? Oh man, you guys are ready to go, huh? Oh, here we go. Yes, and I'll try to repeat it so we get it in the camera.
Content-wise, like World Surf League, it's never what's on TV in Australia, let's say, you're not tied into it.
So the question, I'll try to restate that, is it's hard to restate that one. So is specifically to Rich and surfing, do you have some advantages maybe because you're on the internet and because it's a sort of a different model? Maybe is that kind of what you're saying from a content perspective?
Yeah, it's been interesting. We have still dabbled in some broadcast partnerships. So in Australia, we're actually featured on Fuel TV. Haven't necessarily seen a huge impact on tune in to our own broadcast of it. But it's just that opportunity to expose us to an audience that otherwise didn't yet know that we were around. But yeah, I think it's a huge advantage. I mean, one of the biggest things for us is that we were able to bring dynamic mid-roll advertising to our space. I didn't realize I was going to be the advertising guy, but I'll keep talking about it. But it was a big deal for us because we have a global footprint, and we bring on sponsorship. We bring on sponsorship from companies that have global footprints. So for Jeep, it means that they can run their winter ads for one hemisphere and their summer ads for the other hemisphere and reach our entire audience at the same time. And so that, to us, was kind of a big game changer for us in what we can provide to them, to the folks who are kind of footing that bill. Yeah, I think it puts us at a huge advantage where we're not necessarily as beholden to even just hardware constraints, even just kind of infrastructure kind of, I will say we are still trying to figure out, Scuddy tone, ways in which we kind of, there's still an expectation that we deliver a TV experience. A lot of the guys that produce our shows are from Fox Sports and from NFL, and these guys are used to producing these things a certain way, and the team expects that you come back from that ad exactly as you would if it was a linear broadcast. So we're held to very tight margins on a failover, but that doesn't necessarily prevent us from also wanting to participate in network inventory and be dynamic and deliver that individualized experience. So it's a challenge, but I think we're at an advantage against the traditional folks.
It makes me think of one time somebody said that movies have become trailers for video games, right? It's like, you get involved and it starts a franchise and you spend all your time in the video game, a 2-hour movie. Sometimes I think now broadcast might be the trailer for the internet experience, right? Where you can really go really deep and spend a lot of time there. And so I think there's potentially complementary things. So I don't think anyone's going to say, oh, broadcast is going to disappear. I think the dynamics that are going to change and the monetization across multiple different distribution mechanisms and especially live streaming and being able to all of a sudden say, I want to go to that surfing event, but I want to see the 12 Periscope cameras or 12, we keep saying Periscope, but it's really just live cameras, that people are maybe running themselves could get that, and that gives them a better experience. That could be very interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell that the story I mentioned on the call. We actually found good success. Our social team is very good about trying to keep an eye on what stories might be developing and seeing ways in which they can augment the broadcast by covering that story in a way that the broadcast can't. So, for example, we had we did a contest down the beach here in San Clemente where there was a particularly contentious score applied to a surfer's maneuver. He got out of the water, and it wound up blowing up on social, and it was a very heated debate about whether he deserved the score that he got. When he got out of the water, you logically wanted to hear his input, you wanted to hear his feedback. he lost the round, and we typically interview the winner. Broadcast was able to do a slight sliver of an interview and kind of get his thoughts on a light level, but then they had to go back to the next heat that was in the water. Right when we did that, our social team fired up a Periscope stream and followed him for the rest of the time all the way into the locker room and gave you a really personal look at how he was reacting to the whole experience and what his take was on it. It was a perfect way to kind of augment the broadcast and provide kind of added value. The trick that we're going to try and figure out going forward is how do we then logically throw you back to the broadcast? But I think for that person who otherwise might have been tuned out by the next heat that started, it at least gave us that added couple of minutes of time to be able to kind of keep you engaged and keep you involved.
But let me play Eric for just a second to say, now, Rich, I think you're not telling the audience. When they say professional crew, like maybe you could speak on what Peter Mell does when he's remote and he's not in the, like, I don't even want to spoil it.
No, we haven't gotten into too much of the tech. I mean, we're playing a lot with waterproof mics. Our commentators oftentimes... Yeah, so a lot of the guys are actually former professional surfers themselves. So he's talking about Pete Mell. He's a big wave surfer. He's used to surfing at Mavericks up north. Very comfortable paddling into 30, 40, 50-foot waves. So when we put him in the lineup, he sits there with a mic pack on his back and a water mic like this, and he's able to actually conduct interviews from the lineup. So the second that the heat ends, surfers paddle over to him, he links his arm to them, and then they conduct their post-heat interview floating with the camera on the jet ski from the back. It's really fun. We get to kind of explore a lot of new angles that I don't think most other sports have the opportunity to. That said, it would be fantastic to have a stadium and like bolted equipment and all the like beautiful, like be able to. Yeah, we're jealous on that front, but we definitely kind of lean into the on-beach environment as best we can.
All right, well, we're actually out of time. Please thank the panel with me, and it's a great job, guys.